Hello again. From time to time, I ask myself whether the champions of anti-racism are being deliberately obtuse as part of a dishonest debating tactic, or if there is a simpler explanation, that is to say that they are not all that bright. I have lately been tending towards that latter point of view, although I'm open to persuasion that I'm being unduly harsh. Here is one of the favourite arguments marshalled by anti-racists. Smith believes in certain biological differences between human populations, therefore he is a racist. And we all know where that leads, don't we? Remember the Holocaust. Smith must be a Nazi who wishes to see the extermination of other ethnic groups. I had occasion a few weeks ago to tick off a fellow who runs a channel dedicated to denouncing me because he was promoting this very perspective. I suspect, though, that I might as well have saved my breath. There are two flaws in the logic used by such individuals. The first is that this is a version of faulty logic known as the slippery slope argument. This consists of taking some event and claiming that it leads inevitably first to one undesirable outcome and then a cascade of bad consequences resulting in disaster. If we accept any difference in average IQ between ethnic groups, then that is a slippery slope. Before you know it, you'll be herding people into concentration lagers and gassing them. This is not, of course, the only logical problem with the anti-racist view as commonly seen. Another is the apparent inability to check their thinking by mentally inserting little words such as sometimes, often, always, invariably, never, and so on, into their thought processes. I often do this myself when I'm trying to reason something out. I will ask myself whether or not I'm talking of all people, or some people, or most, or a few, or just one, because otherwise, if you're not careful, you start to generalize, and that can be disastrous for the clarity of your thought. So it is that scientific racism is regarded as a bad thing in itself, because it leads to fascism, or because it leads to concentration camps, or suffering, or violence. Of course, it sometimes leads to such outcomes, but does this always happen? Is scientific racism the only concept or ideology which can lead to concentration camps or massacres? These are not questions which the average person who considers himself an anti-racist is likely to reflect upon. If he did, then he might swiftly realise that a belief in the inherent differences between some ethnicities and others has been common throughout the world's history, and it still exists in much of the world, and that it very seldom leads to wholesale slaughter of the kind seen in the Holocaust. In the Congo, for example, the Bantu people regard the pygmies as being barely human. They keep them as slaves, but do not generally treat them cruelly, regarding them more as pets. This is without doubt an unfortunate state of affairs, but it is nevertheless an instance of what might very well be described as racism, or scientific racism, which has endured for centuries, probably millennia. Racism of this kind can actually make for stable societies, not fascist dictatorships. In the same way, we can think of the world's largest democracy, India, with its caste system based upon historical ethnic groups. In short, systematic racism does not always lead to massacres and Nazi dictatorships. Then too we could ask ourselves if racism is the only concept which can be misused, as the Nazis misused the idea of scientific racism. What about socialism? In the Soviet Union, this resulted in concentration camps and mass murders. But does that mean that we should shun socialism and avoid it like the plague, on the grounds that it leads to concentration camps and dictatorships? True, it has sometimes done so in the past, but I don't think that we can condemn anybody with socialist leanings because of what Stalin got up to in the name of socialism. Christianity has been a driving force behind both the ethnic cleansing of the Crusades and also the massacres of the Inquisition. Does this mean that we should regard Christianity as an inherently dangerous doctrine because it has in the past led to massacres and war? I seriously doubt that the run-of-the-mill anti-racist is capable of tackling points of this kind, which is why I seldom bother trying to correct them. In a day or two I shall make another video in which I'll explain why I think that the current trend of anti-racism is not only harmful to society, but also, counterintuitively, damaging to black people themselves.